The wind in Clearwater Valley never truly stopped. It was the only constant thing. It blew in the spring of 1878, and it had blown forever. It carried the scent of dry sage and the red dust that coated everything. The dust was fine as flour. It settled on the sills of the small cabins. It worked its way into the seams of clothing. It tasted like iron and distance. Samuel Harper stood on the porch of his ranch house. He was a man in his 30s. His face was weathered by the sun. His eyes were the color of the pale sky before a storm. He was a quiet man. He lived with the sound of the wind, and he lived with the sound of the windmill. The windmill was a tall metal skeleton behind the barn. Its blades turned with a steady, rhythmic groan. It was the sound of time passing. It was the sound of survival. The windmill pumped the only clean water for miles. He looked east toward the valley mouth. The land was vast. It was beautiful. It was cruel. It was his. This land had belonged to his father. Now it belonged to him. His goal was simple. He would not lose it. He would not be the one to fail. He felt the weight of that promise. It was heavier than the rifle in his hands. Far on the ridge, a different man watched the same valley. His name was Chayton. He was 28. He was a warrior of the Kiowa people. His skin was the color of the red earth he stood upon. He was a guardian. He was a guide. His eyes missed nothing. He saw the smoke from the Harper Ranch. He saw the heat shimmer above the new metal tracks. The railroad, the iron snake that cut through the land. The railroad was coming. It brought pressure. It brought men who did not understand the land. It brought greed. The town of Clearwater was small. It was a collection of raw lumber buildings. It had a saloon. It had a general store. It had a wooden church with a crooked steeple. It had a land office. The land office was the busiest place in town. Men from the rail and cattle company filled the saloon. The RCC, they were land grabbers. They bought drinks for thirsty ranchers. They made offers, first friendly, then less friendly. They wanted the valley. They wanted the water. They wanted the land belonging to Samuel. And they wanted a path through the hills. Chayton looked toward the hills. His jaw tightened. The company men wanted to cut through Red Hollow. Chayton's goal was as simple as the goal of Samuel. He would protect the hollow. Red Hollow was not empty land. It was sacred. It was the place where the spirits of his ancestors slept. It was the place they were buried. The white men saw only rock and dirt. Chayton saw the heart of his people. In the town of Clearwater, there were many prejudices. The townsfolk were wary. They were caught between the old ways and the new money. They looked sideways at the Kiowa. They called them savages. They did not understand their connection to the land. They also whispered about the new women who came west on the train. The mail-order brides. They saw these women as failures from the east. Women who could not find a husband. Women who sold themselves for a piece of land. Samuel Harper knew what they said. He did not care about their talk. He cared about the drought. He cared about the debt notices pinned to the board in the land office. The RCC owned the bank. The RCC owned the debt. And the RCC had the support of Sheriff Kellen. Kellen was a large man with a metal badge and empty eyes. He was paid by the company. He ignored the fences that were cut. He ignored the cattle that went missing. He told Samuel it was just bad luck, or maybe the Kiowa. Samuel turned from the porch. He walked past the barn. He stopped under the shade of the great oak tree. This tree was his only true refuge. His mother had planted it. It was the only thing that felt permanent. He leaned his head against the rough bark. The wood was warm. He was tired. The ranch was too big for one man. The loneliness was a physical ache. It was a cold space in his chest. He had done a desperate thing. Weeks ago in the middle of the night he had lit a lamp. He had taken paper and ink. He had written a letter. He had sent it to a service in the East, a service that found wives for men in the West. He had advertised for a mail-order bride. The shame of it still felt hot. It felt like a brand. He was a Harper. Harpers did not beg for help, but he was alone, and the RCC was circling. He needed a partner, not just a wife. He needed someone to stand with him. He had been honest in the letter. He described the ranch. He described the hard work. He described the wind. He did not describe the depth of his fear. He did not describe the wolves from the RCC. He did not know what kind of woman would answer such a letter. He expected no one, or perhaps someone broken, someone as desperate as he was. A new person was moving toward this valley. Her name was Elena Morris. She was 24. She was on a train moving west. Her world was contained in a single worn trunk. She was leaving a life in the East, a life of judgment and limited choices. She clutched a small book in her lap. She was not broken. She was determined. Her goal was a new beginning. She wanted a home. She wanted a place where her mind could be useful. She wanted to teach. She wanted to build something real. She had seen the letter from Samuel Harper. She saw the honesty between the simple words. She saw the ranch not as a prison, but as a blank page. Chayton moved silently along the ridge. He saw the tracks of shod horses. They were near Red Hollow. He bent down. He touched the print in the dust. Surveyors. They had come back. He felt a cold anger. He was a man of peace. But peace had to be defended. He would defend the graves of his fathers. The tension in Clearwater was rising. You could feel it in the air. The heat was building. The wind carried whispers of conflict. The townsfolk drank their beer in the saloon. They watched the RCC men. They watched Sheriff Kellen. They were poised between their greed for the railroad boom and the quiet voice of their conscience. They were afraid to choose. Samuel finished his chores. He mended a fence line. The wood was dry and split. His hands were calloused. He worked until the sun was low. The sky turned a deep shade of orange. He mounted his horse. He rode to town. He needed supplies. He needed to check the post office. He tied his horse to the rail outside the general store. Mr. Boyd, the store owner, watched him enter. Boyd was a good man. He saw the strain on Samuel. He nodded. He did not speak. Samuel bought flour and coffee. Then he walked to the small post cage in the corner. There was a letter. It was not a bill. It was not a notice from the bank. The envelope was clean. The postmark was from the east. His heart beat a heavy, slow rhythm. He took the letter. He paid Mr. Boyd. He walked back outside into the dying light. He stood by his horse. The street was quiet. He opened the letter. The paper felt different. It was smooth. The handwriting was clear. It was precise. It was not the hand of a broken woman. He read the words. Her name was Elena Morris. She accepted his proposal. She understood the terms. She was not afraid of work. She would be a true partner. She would arrive on the 14th. Samuel read the line again. The 14th of the month. He looked at the calendar in his mind. That was in 3 days. A feeling washed over him. It was not just hope. It was not just fear. It was both. It was a terrifying wave of life. He had called for a companion, and now she was coming. He had thrown a rock into a deep well, and now he heard the splash. He folded the letter. He put it in his shirt pocket. He could feel the paper against his skin. He looked at the unfinished railroad tracks, the tracks that ended in the dust. The RCC wanted his land. Chayton wanted to protect his hollow. And now Elena Morris was coming to this fight. He mounted his horse. He rode out of town. He rode toward the ranch. The wind pushed against him. The windmill turned. It groaned its song of time and drought. The sound was no longer lonely. It sounded like anticipation. It sounded like a countdown. The 14th. A fire was lit, a quiet hope, a terrible uncertainty. The valley was holding its breath. The train whistle was a thin scream against the endless sky. Samuel Harper heard it before he saw the smoke. He stood on the raw lumber platform of the Clearwater station. He had slicked his hair down with water. He wore his only clean shirt. It felt stiff. It smelled faintly of lye soap. He had scrubbed his hands, but the dirt under his nails was permanent. It was the valley. It was the ranch. He shifted his weight from one boot to the other. He felt like a fool. A man of 30 years and more, waiting for a woman he had bought with a 3-cent stamp. He looked at the few others on the platform. 2 ranchers waiting for barbed wire. A woman from the saloon. They paid him no mind. They were all waiting for something. The locomotive appeared. It was a black iron beast. It hissed steam. It slowed with a great grinding of metal. The sound was too loud for the valley. It felt like an invasion. The train stopped. The steam cleared. A few passengers got off. A man in a suit carrying a salesman case. A family heading further west. Then he saw her. She was not what he expected. The women in the mail order catalogs looked pale, they looked frightened, or they looked hard. Elena Morris was neither. She was tired. That was plain. There was dust on her traveling suit. But she stood tall. She held her head high. She stepped onto the platform. She held a single well-worn bag. In her other hand she clutched a small book. Its cover was stained with ink. She saw him. He knew she did. He was the only man standing alone. He was the only man looking for someone. He took off his hat. He walked toward her. His boots sounded too loud on the boards. He stopped a few feet away. He could smell the soot from the train on her. He cleared his throat. Miss Morris. She looked directly at him. Her eyes were gray. They were steady. They were tired, but they were intelligent. She was taking his measure, just as he was taking hers. Mr. Harper. Her voice was lower than he expected. It was clear. He reached for her bag. Allow me. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she let him take it. The bag was heavy, heavier than it looked. My trunk is in the baggage car. He nodded. I will get it. The wagon is over here. He led the way. He felt her walking behind him. He was aware of every step. This was the woman who would sleep in his house. This was the woman who would share his name. This was the stranger he had tied himself to. As Samuel turned toward the baggage car, Elena waited by the wagon. She felt the eyes on her. It was not just Samuel. It was the heat. It was the dust. It was the entire town. She felt exposed. Across the street, leaning against the saloon porch, a man in a dark coat watched them. He was not a local. He did not have the sun-baked look of the ranchers. He was pale. His eyes were sharp. He looked at Samuel. Then his gaze settled on Elena. His expression did not change, but his eyes narrowed. He watched her. He watched as if he was confirming something, as if he had found something he was looking for. Elena felt a chill. It was the same feeling she had in the East, the feeling of being observed, of being hunted. The man pushed himself off the wall. He did not approach. He melted back into the shadows of the saloon doorway. But he had seen her. He knew who she was. Samuel returned. He was rolling her trunk on a small cart. He lifted it into the back of the wagon. It was a heavy trunk. He did not grunt. He did not complain. He just did the work. He helped her up onto the wagon seat. The wood was hot. He untied the reins. He clicked his tongue. The horses moved. The wagon pulled onto the main street of Clearwater. The town was a single dusty road. It was lined with false front buildings. The general store, the land office, the saloon, the sheriff office. She saw the looks. Women peered from behind curtains. Men on the boardwalk stopped talking. They watched the wagon pass. She heard the whisper. Mail order. The words were sharp. They were meant to cut. She kept her eyes forward. She sat straight. Mr. Boyd, the owner of the general store. He was sweeping the porch. He saw Samuel. He saw Elena. He was the man who had given Samuel the letter. He paused his sweeping. He raised a hand in a small, decent wave. Samuel nodded back. It was a small gesture of welcome. Further down, a group of men idled outside the saloon. One of them, a man named Carter. He was known for his lazy manner and his cruel mouth. He saw Elena. He laughed. He called out in a loud voice, Be sure to check the goods, Samuel. Sometimes they are damaged in the mail. Elena flinched. She felt the heat rise in her face. Samuel did not look. His hands tightened on the reins. His knuckles turned white. He said nothing. He just drove the wagon steady. He drove past Carter. He drove past the last building. He drove out of town. Elena let out a breath she did not know she was holding. She looked at the man beside her. His jaw was set. His profile was hard. He had not defended her, not with words. But he had not stopped. He had not risen to the bait. He had simply moved them forward. They rode in silence. The valley opened up. It was enormous. The sky was bigger than any sky she had ever seen. The mountains were purple in the distance. The air smelled of sage and dust, always the dust. The ranch was miles from the town. The wagon wheels cut through the red dirt. The ride was rough. About halfway to the ranch, the road dipped down to a small creek. Trees grew here. It was the only real shade they had seen. Samuel pulled the horses to a stop. "They need water," he said. He got down. He walked to the back of the wagon. He pulled out a bucket. As he dipped it into the creek, a figure emerged from the trees. Elena tensed. The man moved without a sound. He was Kiowatawa. He wore buckskin pants and a simple shirt. He carried no rifle, but there was a knife at his belt. He was tall. He moved with a grace that was almost like water. Samuel saw him. He did not reach for his gun, but his body went still. "Chayton," Samuel said. His voice was flat. "Samuel?" Chayton replied. His voice was deep. He nodded. His eyes moved from Samuel. They rested on Elena. He looked at her for a long moment. He was not judging her. He was reading her. He saw the ink stains on her fingers. He saw the weariness. He saw the spine that held her straight. Samuel finished watering the first horse. He moved to the second. The silence stretched. Chayton spoke. His gaze shifted east, toward the hills. "There is smoke," he said. "Far off. The wind is from the north, but it will change." Samuel looked. He could see nothing, but he knew Chayton could see things he could not. He knew Chayton understood this land in a way no white man did. There was a history between Samuel and Chayton, a history of fences and water rights. It was not a friendly history, but it was a history of respect. "I will watch for it," Samuel said. Chayton nodded again. He looked once more at Elena. Then he turned. He disappeared back into the trees. He made no sound. He was gone. Elena looked at Samuel. "Who was that?" "Chayton. He is Kiowatawa. His people live in the hills." "He said there was smoke." Samuel nodded. He hung the bucket on the wagon. He climbed back onto the seat. He did not offer any more information. He clicked the reins. The wagon moved on. They arrived at the ranch an hour later. The house was small. It was sturdy. It was built of thick timber. Behind it stood the barn. And behind the barn, the tall metal windmill turned. It groaned. It sang its lonely song to the wind. The land was vast. She could see for miles, but she also saw the neglect. Fences were down. The garden was choked with weeds. The porch step was loose. This was a place that needed more than one pair of hands. Samuel carried her trunk inside. The house was clean, but it was empty. It was the house of a man living alone. There were no curtains. There were no comforts. "This will be your room." He pointed to a small door. She entered. The room was small. It had a bed, a washstand, a small dresser. It was clean. Samuel stood in the doorway. He turned his hat in his hands. "I will be in the barn," he said. "The kitchen is, you can find what you need." He left. She was alone. She sat on the bed. The mattress was firm. She looked around the small room. This was her new home. A small room in a silent house, with a silent man. She stood up. She walked back into the main room. It served as a kitchen, a dining room, a living space. There was a large wooden table. There was a cold stove. And on the table, in a chipped pottery jar, there was a cluster of wildflowers. Blue and yellow. They were already wilting in the heat. She touched a pedal. He had done this. Samuel Harper, the quiet man, the man who wrote the desperate letter. He had put wildflowers on the table. It was a clumsy gesture. It was a sign of a kindness he did not know how to express. It was the first real thing she knew about him. Her goal had been simple. She wanted a home, a place to be safe, a place to start over. She looked around the room. Her eyes fell on a small desk in the corner. It was covered in papers. She walked over. She was not snooping. She was a partner. That was the agreement. She saw the ledger book. It was open. She saw the stack of notices. Tax bills, overdue. Debt notes, held by the bank in Clearwater. And on the bottom of the debt notes, she saw the insignia. A circle with 2 letters, R and C, the Rail and Cattle Company. She felt the chill again. The same one from the train platform. She knew that company. Or she knew of its partners in the East. She knew the firm in Chicago, the one she had worked for, the one she had fled from. She picked up a notice, a fee for shipping, a fee for storage. The numbers were wrong. They were inflated. This was not debt. This was fraud. This was the exact same kind of theft she had uncovered before. She had run across the country. She had tried to escape her past. She had come to this valley seeking shelter. She looked out the window. She saw the vast empty land. She saw the windmill turning. She saw Samuel walking from the barn. She realized her goal had just changed. She was not here to find shelter. She was here to stand her ground. She was not here to hide. She was here to help this ranch survive. That night, they sat at the kitchen table. The oil lamp cast a small circle of yellow light. The rest of the room was in shadow. Eliana had cooked a simple meal, beans and cornbread. They ate in silence. It was not a comfortable silence. It was the silence of 2 strangers bound by paper, 2 people who did not know how to begin. But it was not the same silence Samuel was used to. The house was no longer empty. There was another person breathing, another person sharing the small circle of light. Elena looked at him. His face was hard in the lamplight, but she had seen the wildflowers. "We should look at the books tomorrow," she said. Samuel looked up from his plate. His eyes were wary. "I have experience with accounts," she said. "I believe I can help." He just nodded. He did not ask questions, not yet. Back in Clearwater, the saloon was closing. The man in the black coat stepped out into the night. He walked to the telegraph office. It was closed. He would send his message in the morning. He took a small notebook from his pocket. He looked at the entry he had made. Target Elena Morris, confirmed. Associate Samuel Harper, Harper Ranch, vehicle farm wagon. He closed the book. The threat was no longer distant. It was here. It had followed her, and it was now aimed at the Harper Ranch. The day after her arrival began with a false calm. The air was still. The heat was a heavy blanket. Elena sat at the kitchen table. The ledger book was open before her. The numbers were not just figures. They were a story of extortion. She traced the columns of false fees. The shipping costs were double what they should be. The storage charges were pure fiction. She had seen this before. It was the quiet violence of a pen. It was the kind of theft that wore a suit and tie. Samuel was outside. He was mending the loose step on the porch. He hammered with a frustrated rhythm. Each strike was a blow against the bank, against the Rail and Cattle Company, against his own failure. He had looked at the papers with her for a long time this morning. He said nothing, but she saw the shame in his eyes. The shame of a capable man forced into a corner. She looked out the window. The sky was a pale, hazy white. The wind had died. It was unnatural. Chayton's words from yesterday came back to her. There is smoke, far off. Samuel finished hammering. He stood up. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. He looked east. He was sniffing the air, like an animal. Elena joined him on the porch. "What is it?" He did not look at her. He kept staring at the ridge. "The wind, it stopped." As he said it, a small breeze touched her face. It was not a cool breeze. It was hot. It was like the breath from an oven, and it carried a new smell. It was not sage. It was not dust. It was pine, burning pine. "It is still far off," he said. He was trying to convince himself. But the new wind was picking up speed. It was not the usual wind. This one came from the north. It was erratic. "The smoke Chayton saw," she said. Samuel nodded. He went back inside. He came out with his rifle. He did not check it. It was always ready. He went to the barn. He saddled his horse, just in case. Elena went back to the ledgers, but the numbers blurred. She could not concentrate. The low moan of the wind was rising. It was becoming a howl, and the smell of smoke was stronger. It was sharp. It was acrid. She went back to the porch. The sky to the east was no longer white. It was a dirty rising yellow. "Samuel!" Her voice was sharp. He ran from the barn. He looked, and he swore. A low, deep curse that the wind stole from his lips. It was no longer far off. A plume of black smoke rose above the eastern ridge, and as they watched, a tongue of red flame licked over the top. It was miles away, but the wind was blowing directly at them. "The wind will push it down the valley," he said. He was speaking to himself. "It will follow the dry creek bed. It will miss us if it stays north." But the wind was a liar. It gusted. It swirled. Elena watched the smoke. It was not moving past them. It was moving toward them. Toward the barn. Toward the single great oak tree. "The horses," Samuel's voice was tight. "Get the buckets. Fill them from the windmill cistern. Put them by the house." He ran to the corral. He threw open the gate. He unlatched the barn doors. The horses were inside. They were already nervous. They could smell the smoke. They rolled their eyes. Elena ran to the windmill. The metal blades were spinning wildly. They groaned and shrieked. It was the sound of panic. She grabbed a bucket. She dipped it into the stone cistern. The water was low. The windmill was pumping hard, but it was not fast enough. The bucket was heavy. She ran. She splashed water onto her skirt. She put the bucket by the porch. She ran back. The heat was intense. The air was full of ash. It looked like black snow. It stung her eyes. It coated her tongue. She filled the second bucket. She ran back. She saw Samuel. He was fighting with his own saddle horse. The animal was rearing. Samuel was a strong man. He held the reins. He spoke in a low, calm voice, but the horse was mad with terror. The fire was moving faster than a man could run. It was no longer on the ridge. It was in the valley. It was a roaring red wall. It consumed the dry grass with a sound like a rushing river. Elena ran back for a third bucket. Her lungs burned. Her legs ached. This was hopeless. The buckets were drops against a sea of flame. A gust of wind, hotter than the rest. It carried a cloud of burning embers. They rained down. They landed on the dry roof of the barn. They landed on the porch. Elena saw a small spark land on the hem of her cotton skirt. She did not scream. She gasped. The dry fabric went up in a sheet of flame. It licked up her leg. She dropped the bucket. She fell to the ground. She rolled. She beat the flames with her bare hands. She smothered the fire against the red dust. The fire was out. She was shaking. She looked at her hands. The skin was red. Blisters were already rising on her palms. Samuel yelled, "Elena, get in the house!" She stood up. She shook her head. She would not hide. She grabbed the bucket. She ran back to the cistern. Samuel got the last of the horses out of the barn. They scattered. They ran west, away from the fire. He had saved the animals. He turned. He saw the main wall of fire hit the dry creek bed. It was close, too close. The barn was smoking. The great oak tree was in the path of the flames. He looked for Elena. She was running from the cistern. Her skirt was blackened. She was limping, but she was coming. A burning branch from a nearby cottonwood snapped. It fell from the sky. It was a flaming spear. It was falling directly toward Elena. She did not see it. She was looking at the ground. "Samuel," He did not shout her name. He just moved. He ran. He shoved her hard. She fell. The bucket flew from her hands. Samuel did not stop. He did not have time to dodge. He raised his arm, his thick canvas shirt. He batted the burning branch away. It broke against his forearm. He heard the sizzle. He smelled the burning cloth. He smelled his own skin. The pain was immediate. It was white hot. He clenched his jaw. He did not make a sound. He looked at Elena. She was on the ground. She was staring at him, her eyes wide with terror. "Get up," he grunted. He pulled her to her feet. The heat was unbearable. They could not breathe. The barn was going to go. The house was going to go. They had failed. And then they were there. Through the smoke, 3 riders. They did not come from the road. They came from the east, from inside the fire. It was Chaitin. He was flanked by 2 other Kiowa warriors. They rode low on their horses. Their faces were grim. They carried wet blankets. They did not stop to talk. They did not look at Samuel or Elena. They went straight for the barn. They rode past it. They herded the last 2 panicked horses. They drove them west. Chaitin pulled his horse to a stop in front of Samuel. The animal was coated in foam. Chaitin's face was smeared with soot. He looked at the burning oak tree. He looked at the barn. He looked at the wind. He pointed northwest. "The wind changes!" He yelled over the roar. 10 breaths! He kicked his horse. He rode after his companions. They were creating a firebreak. They were fighting the fire on their own terms. Samuel grabbed Elena. He pulled her behind the cistern. It was the only solid thing. They crouched. The fire was 20 yards away. The barn wall was smoking. 1, Samuel counted in his head. 2, the heat was peeling the skin from his face. 3, he could hear the oak tree crackling. 4, he looked at Elena. Her eyes were closed. She was praying, or just enduring. 5, 6. The sound of the fire changed. It was not a roar. It was a groan. 7. The wind, it did not die. It hesitated. It swirled. A vortex of ash and smoke spun around them. 8, 9. And then it shifted. A massive gust. Cold. It came from the northwest, the direction Chaitin had pointed. It hit the wall of flame. It pushed the fire back. It bent the flames away from the barn, away from the house. It pushed the fire back onto itself, back toward the land it had already burned. The immediate danger was over. Samuel let out a breath he had been holding for an hour. He sagged against the cistern. His arm was screaming. The pain was a living thing. Elena opened her eyes. She looked. The barn was standing. The house was safe. The fence line was a black smoking scar. The great oak tree had one side badly scorched, but it was alive. They stood up. They were covered in soot. They were exhausted. They looked at each other. They were survivors. An hour later, the smoke was thick, but the fire was moving away. They sat on the porch. Neither had spoken. A single rider approached. It was Sheriff Kellen. He was on a fresh horse. His uniform was clean. He stopped his horse. He did not get down. He looked at the blackened fence line. He looked at the scorched tree. He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "Looks like you had some trouble," he said. His voice was casual. Samuel just looked at him. Kellen nodded toward the hills. Saw some of those Kiowa riding hard. They like to set fires. Scare folks off their land, trying to keep the railroad out. Elena stood up. Her voice was hoarse from the smoke. Her hands were wrapped in a rag. "That is not true, Sheriff." Kellen looked at her. His eyes were cold. He had not seen her at the train station. He just saw a woman. "Ma'am, you are new here. You do not understand how these things work. They saved this ranch," she said. Her voice was shaking, but it was strong. "They saved the horses." Kellen laughed, a short, ugly sound. He looked at Samuel. "You keep strange company, Harper. The rail and cattle company is making a fair offer for this land. A man might think all this trouble. He gestured to the burned land. All this trouble could just go away if you just signed the paper. He tipped his hat. Ma'am. He turned his horse. He rode away. The threat was not subtle. It was as raw as the burned land. That night, the house was full of the smell of ash. The lamp was lit. They sat at the kitchen table. Samuel was staring at his arm. He had unwrapped it. The burn was bad. It was red and weeping. Elena stood up. She went to her trunk. She pulled out a small tin. She came back. She had a bowl. She mixed dried herbs with a small amount of lard. She made a green paste. She came to him. He pulled his arm back. It is fine. She looked him in the eyes. It is not fine. It will fester. She reached for his arm. He did not pull away this time. Her touch was gentle, but it was firm. She cleaned the wound. He hissed, but he let her. She spread the cool paste on the burn. The pain did not stop, but it eased. Let me do this, she whispered. It was not a request. It was a statement. She was a partner. This was her place. He watched her. He saw her own hands. They were blistered and raw. She had not tended to her own burns. Your hands, he said. His voice was rough. They will heal, she said. She tore a clean strip of cotton. She wrapped his arm. Her movements were precise. They were competent. She finished. She tied the knot. Her fingers brushed his skin. He stood up. He felt unsteady. He went to the porch. He needed air, even if the air was full of smoke. The moon was high. It was a pale white circle behind the haze. Elena followed him. She had 2 cups of water. She handed him one. They stood in silence. He looked at the scorched oak tree. It was still standing. A shadow detached itself from the tree. Samuel tensed. It was Chayton. He was standing in the yard. He was just watching. He was not a threat. He was a guardian. He was checking on the ranch. Samuel looked at the warrior. He looked at the woman beside him. His arm throbbed. He raised his cup, a small stiff gesture, a salute. Across the dark yard, Chayton saw it. He raised his hand, palm forward, a sign of respect. The 3 of them, the rancher, the mail-order bride, the Kiawatawa warrior. They stood under a sky stained with smoke. The wind was quiet. The windmill groaned softly. A fragile alliance had been formed. It was not built on words. It was built on fire and water and survival. The morning after the fire, the world was gray. Ash covered the ground like a soft, terrible snow. The air smelled of char and loss. Inside the small ranch house, the smell was just as strong. It clung to their clothes. It was in their hair. Elena sat at the kitchen table. The ledger book was open. The pages were stark black and white against the gray morning. Samuel stood by the window. He was drinking coffee. His bandaged arm was held stiffly at his side. The silence in the room was different. Yesterday it had been the silence of strangers. Today it was the silence of survivors. He had watched her sleep. She had fallen onto her small bed, fully dressed, exhausted. He had not slept at all. He had sat in the chair by the door, his rifle across his knees. He had watched the hills. The fire had burned itself out against a rocky ridge to the south. But he watched for a new fire, a different kind of fire. He turned from the window. He looked at the woman at his table. Her face was streaked with soot. Her hands, the hands he had seen tending his burn, were raw. The blisters had broken. She had not complained. She had not cried. She had faced the fire. She had held her ground. The fire had burned away his pretense. It had burned away the last of his pride. He sat down across from her. He put his cup on the table. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I had no right, he said. His voice was a low rasp. Elena looked up from the numbers. Her gray eyes were clear. What do you mean? To write that letter, to bring you here. She waited. She knew there was more. This ranch, he gestured to the world outside the window. It is failing. I told you I needed a partner. I did not tell you the truth. I am losing it. He tapped the ledger. You see the numbers? The debt to the rail and cattle company. The taxes. I thought I could hold on. My father, he built this place. He broke himself building it. I am not going to be the son who loses it. His shame was a physical thing. It was a poison. I thought, he looked at his hands, I thought if I had a wife, a partner, it would be easier. But it was desperation. I did not write that letter for a partner. I wrote it for a lifeline. And I dragged you into this. This, he looked at his burned arm, this fight. You should have stayed on that train. You should have gone on to California. Elena listened. She did not look at him with pity. She did not look at him with fear. She looked at him with a strange, new kind of calm. She had run from a fight in the East. She had run right into a new one. But this time, she was not alone. She pushed the ledger book toward him. You are right, Samuel. You are losing this ranch, but you are not losing it because you are a bad rancher. You are losing it because you are being robbed. He frowned. Robbed? I owe the money. She shook her head. No, you owe some of it. But look, she pointed with a raw finger. This line, transportation fee, this one, storage charge. This is not real. The rail and cattle company is charging you for services they never gave. They are inflating the cost of every bag of feed, every roll of wire. They have done this to hundreds of farmers. I have seen it before. He looked at the numbers. It was just paper to him. It was a language he did not understand. He understood cattle. He understood drought. He understood fire. What good does it do? He said, we cannot fight the railroad. We cannot fight their bank. We do not fight them with guns. She said, not yet. We fight them with this. She tapped the ledger. And we fight them with this. She pointed out the window. He saw nothing, just burned land. You are a cattle rancher, she said. You sell your beef once a year to their buyer at their price, but you have 2 milk cows in that barn. I saw them. I used them for he stopped. For milk. For myself. And the chickens, she asked. They run wild. I gather eggs when I think of it. Elena leaned forward. Her eyes were bright. The fire was gone from the hills. But there was a new fire in this room. We stop being only a cattle ranch. We start being a farm. We will milk those cows every day. I will make butter. I will make cheese. I will bake bread. Every day. You have hay in the high meadow. The fire did not touch it. I feed that to the herd in winter. You will feed some of it, she said, and you will cut the rest, and you will sell it. The cavalry post at Fort Grant needs hay. They will pay cash, not credit. Samuel stared at her. This was not the woman he expected. This was not a helper. This was a general. She saw the doubt in his face. She softened her voice. A home is not a thing you find, Samuel. It is not just a house. A home is a thing you build. You build it with small actions. Every day, 1 fence post, 1 bucket of water, 1 loaf of bread. She took a deep breath. She had found her own motto. They think we are weak, she said. They think you are a beaten man. And I am just a mail-order bride. We will show them they are wrong. We will fight them 1 coin at a time. The next days were filled with work. The work was a kind of medicine. It healed the trauma of the fire. Elena taught Samuel how to milk the cows properly. His large, rough hands were clumsy at first, but he learned. She found her mother's recipes in her trunk. She began to bake, the house filled with the smell of yeast and warm bread. It was a smell of life. It pushed the smell of ash out the door. Samuel rode to the high meadow. He cut the hay. He baled it. His burned arm ached, but the work was good. He was not just defending. He was building. Elena found an old glass jar, a big one that had once held pickles. She scrubbed it clean. She placed it on the mantel. 4 days later, Samuel rode to Fort Grant. He sold the hay to the quartermaster. He returned late that night. He was covered in dust. He was exhausted, but his face was different. He walked into the kitchen. Elena was mending his shirt by lamplight. He dropped a heavy cloth bag on the table.
"Cash," he said, "not credit."
Elena untied the bag. She counted out the silver dollars. She took one. She walked to the mantel. She dropped it into the glass jar. The clink of the coin was a bright sound. It was the sound of a bell. It was the sound of the first brick being laid. "We have begun," she said. They worked. They worked from sunup to sundown. He repaired the burned fences. She planted a new garden, the one the fire had missed. She used the new water from the cistern. They did not talk about the future. They built it. The relationship between them was slow. It was not built on soft words. It was built on shared labor. He saw the blisters on her hands. He took the heavy bucket from her without a word. She saw the way he favored his arm. She changed his bandage every night. She never mentioned the pain she knew he felt. They were two people learning the language of action. A week later, they rode to Clearwater. The wagon was not empty. It held 2 wheels of fresh cheese. It held 4 loaves of bread. It held 3 dozen eggs. They pulled up to Boyd's general store. Mr. Boyd came out. He looked at the goods. He looked at Samuel. He looked at Elena. "Mr. Boyd," Elena said, "we would like to trade these for flour and coffee." Boyd smiled, a real smile. "It has been a long time since I had fresh cheese in this store." He helped them unload. Mrs. Gable, another rancher's wife, was inside. She saw the cheese. She bought a wheel on the spot. A connection was made. Boyd saw it. He looked at Elena with new respect. Carter was there. He was lounging on the porch. He watched Elena talking to Mrs. Gable. He watched Samuel loading a 50-pound sack of flour. He laughed. That ugly sound. "Well now, Harper, moving up in the world, are we? Got your wife doing the trading for you." He spat. "Guess you are letting her wear the pants now." Samuel stopped. He did not ignore him. He set the sack of flour down. He turned. He walked slowly toward Carter. He was not a big man, but he was solid. He was made of hard work and desperation. Carter's smile faded. Samuel stopped a foot from him. He spoke in a low voice, a voice that did not carry, but it was clear. "She is not my mail-order wife," he said. "She is Mrs. Harper, and she knows numbers, which is more than I can say for a man whose only job is to warm a porch rail. You will speak to her with respect." Carter went pale. He looked at Samuel's eyes. He saw the fire, not the one in the hills, a different one. He mumbled something. He looked away. He pushed himself off the rail. He went into the saloon. Samuel turned. He picked up the flour. He put it in the wagon. Elena had seen it all. She felt a warmth in her chest. It had nothing to do with the sun. He had defended her. He had claimed her. Publicly. Other farmers on the street had seen it too. A few nodded, a quiet approval, but others, men who owed money to the rail and cattle company, they looked away. They shuffled their feet. They were afraid. They did not want to be seen standing with Samuel Harper. The fight was his, not theirs. The drought was still the true enemy. The cistern was low. The windmill pumped, but it was not enough for the garden. The new cheese-making, the herd. Samuel was digging a new post hole near the burned fence line. The ground was like iron. He was sweating. He was frustrated. A shadow fell over him. Chayton, the Kiowa warrior, was standing there. He had come on foot. He made no sound. He watched Samuel fight the dry earth. He looked at the straining windmill. He grunted, "Your skywell is tired." Samuel leaned on the shovel. "It is the only water I have." Chayton looked at the land. He knew this land. He knew its secrets. He knew where the water slept. He gestured with his chin. "Follow." Samuel was hesitant. He left the shovel. He followed. Elena watched from the porch. She saw the two men walk away. The settler, the warrior. She felt a knot of anxiety. Chayton led him up a small, rocky draw, away from the main valley. He stopped. He pointed. There was a small cluster of willow trees. They were green, bright green, in a world of brown.
Water sleeps here, Chayton said. Deep, but it is there.
Samuel looked at the willows. He had ridden past this place 100 times. He had never seen it.
This is a gift, he said. He knew the value of it.
Chayton looked at him. His eyes were dark. The railroad surveyors are back. They are at the mouth of Red Hollow. Samuel understood. This was a trade. Water for land. The rail and cattle company will not have Red Hollow, Samuel said. Not while I live on this ranch. You have my word. Chayton nodded. It was done. The next day, Chayton returned. He brought 2 men. They helped Samuel dig. They used poles. They used leverage. They worked for 2 days. It was brutal labor, and then they hit it. Not a trickle. A spring, cold, clean, plentiful. They had found a new well. They had found the lifeblood of the ranch. The alliance was sealed. It was not sealed with paper. It was sealed with earth and water. The noose was tightening. Elena rode to town alone for supplies. Samuel was finishing the well. She was in Boyd's store. She was gathering her things. Flour, salt. The man in the black coat was there. He was not looking at her. He was talking to Sheriff Kellen. Kellen was nodding. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. The man in the black coat was giving orders. Elena froze. It was him, the agent from the Chicago office, the man who had questioned her, the man who had threatened her, the reason she had fled. Her heart was a cold stone. She turned away. She pulled her bonnet low. She was different now. She was thinner. She was tanned by the sun. She wore a simple calico dress. He would not recognize her. He must not. She paid Mr. Boyd. She hurried out. Samuel was waiting with the wagon. Sheriff Kellen saw him. He walked over. He ignored Elena. He put one boot up on the wagon wheel. "Harper," he said. He sounded friendly. It was a false sound. "Just some advice. From a friend. You are stirring things up. Selling hay to the fort, this new business with the cheese." He gestured vaguely. "You are getting the other ranchers talking." Samuel just waited. "There are powerful men building this valley," Kellen said. "Men from the rail and cattle company. They are bringing progress. They do not like flies in their whiskey. You understand me." Samuel said nothing. "Be smart." Kellen dropped his voice. "That offer on your land, it is still a good one. For now." He pushed himself off the wheel. He tipped his hat. He walked away. The ride home was silent. Elena sat beside Samuel. She was rigid. Her past had found her. The man in the black coat was here. He was not just a Pinkerton agent. He was her Pinkerton agent. She looked at the man beside her, his strong hands on the reins, his honest face. Her secret was no longer just her own. It was a danger. It was a weapon aimed at this ranch, aimed at Samuel. When they got home, she put the supplies away. She looked at the glass jar on the mantel. It held 4 silver dollars. It held a few smaller coins. It was the sound of their hope. It suddenly seemed very small and very fragile. The truce forged in fire was tested by water. For 3 days after the fire, a heavy, ominous stillness held the valley. The sky was a low, bruised yellow. The air was so thick it was hard to breathe. The new well Chayton had helped Samuel find was a miracle, a deep, cold spring that seemed untouched by the drought. But the rest of the land was tinder. Elena and Samuel worked in a new kind of silence. It was not the silence of strangers. It was the silence of 2 people who carried a shared, unspoken weight. Elena's secret sat at the table with them. The knowledge that the man in the black coat, the Pinkerton, was not just a land grabber but her own personal demon. It was a serpent in their small garden. She had not told Samuel. She did not know how. She saw him look at his burned arm. She saw him look at the $4 silver in the glass jar on the mantel, their tiny cache of hope. She could not bring herself to tell him that his true enemy was not dead. It was her. On the evening of the third day, the wind changed. It did not rise slowly. It died. The windmill, which had been turning lazily, stopped. Its blade stood black and still against the violent purple sky. Samuel came in from the porch. His face was grim. "Go to the root cellar," he said. "What is it?" "A spring storm," he said, but he was looking at the hills. "The ground is baked from the heat, and the fire burned all the grass that holds the soil. When the rain comes, it will not soak in. It will run." He grabbed his heavy coat. Elena shook her head. "I am not hiding in a cellar. What are you doing?" "That new foal, the one born last week. It is in the barn, but the north door is weak. If the wind gets under it, it will peel the roof off, and the creek bed, it will flash flood. I need to secure the door." He lit a lantern. The flame was steady in the still air. "I will help," she said. "It is not safe." She looked at him. Her gray eyes were steady. "Neither is this, but we are partners. You said so." He looked at her for a long moment. He saw the woman who had fought the fire, the woman who had faced down Carter. He nodded. "Once." "Bring the lantern." They stepped outside. The world was holding its breath. The air was electric. It smelled of ozone and damp iron. Then the wind hit. It did not gust. It struck. A solid wall of air that slammed the porch door shut behind them. The lantern flame bent sideways. The first drops of rain were not drops. They were sheets of cold water. They ran for the barn. They were soaked to the skin in 10 seconds. The sound was not rain. It was a roar. The sky tore open. A bolt of lightning struck the ridge. It lit the world in a brief, blinding white. In that instant, Elena saw the creek bed. It was already a churning brown river. The water was rising. They reached the barn. Samuel fought the main door open. They stumbled inside, into the warm darkness. The horses were screaming. They plunged in their stalls. The air was thick with the smell of hay and animal fear. "The north door!" Samuel shouted over the wind. They ran to the back of the barn. The small door was rattling. The wood was bowing. The wind was finding every crack. It shrieked. "Hold the lantern," he yelled. He grabbed a coil of rope. Elena held the light. Her hands were shaking, but she held it steady. The barn felt like a ship in a typhoon. The entire structure was groaning. Wood planks twisted. Rain jetted through the walls. Samuel tried to brace the door. The wind ripped it from his grasp. It flew open. The storm exploded into the barn. Rain and debris flew in. The foal cried out, a high-pitched sound of terror. Samuel grabbed the edge of the door. He was a strong man, but the wind was stronger. It was dragging him out. Elena, she did not think. She dropped the lantern, plunging them into near darkness. She grabbed the rope. She threw her weight next to his. She wrapped the rope around a support beam. "Together," she screamed. They pulled, shoulder to shoulder, their wet clothes clinging. The water was now ankle-deep on the barn floor. It was a flash flood. The creek had breached its banks. "Heave!" he grunted. They pulled the door shut. The force of it threw them back against the stall. Samuel found the wooden bar. He slammed it into place. The door held. They sank to the ground. They were gasping. They were soaked. They were alive. The barn was still a place of terror. The walls shook. The roof seemed to lift with every gust. But the door was closed. Samuel found the lantern. It had not broken. He relit the wick. The small flame cast a tiny circle of gold. He looked at Elena. She was shivering. Her hair was plastered to her face. She was pale, but she was not crying. "We cannot go back to the house," he said. "The water is too high." He led her to a dry corner. There were bales of hay stacked high. He pulled two down. He gestured for her to sit. He grabbed two old horse blankets. They were heavy with wool. They smelled of dust and horse, but they were dry. He wrapped one around her shoulders. She looked at him. Her eyes were huge in the lantern light. He sat beside her, close. The storm was too loud for distance. He put the other blanket around his own shoulders. The horses calmed. Their terror subsided into nervous stomping. The warmth of the animals began to fill the space. The roar of the rain on the tin roof was a constant thunder, but they were safe. He looked at his ranch, this small wooden box. It was all that stood between them and the violence of the world. And the woman beside him, this stranger, she had stood with him, against the fire, against the wind. He looked at her. Her hands were clenched in her lap. We would not have held that door alone. He said, his voice was rough. She looked at him. No, we would not have. The admission hung in the air. It was a new truth. They needed each other. This was not a contract. It was not a bargain made of letters. It was a fact, proven by fire and water. She pulled the blanket tighter. The shared warmth, the isolation, the dim light, it broke the seal on her fear. Samuel, she said. Her voice was low. He had to lean in to hear her. The man in town, the one in the black coat. He turned. His eyes were sharp. What about him? I know him. She said, I did not tell you the truth. He just waited. The wind howled. I came here to hide. She said, I was an accountant in Chicago. I worked for a large grain company. They were partners with the rail and cattle company. His posture stiffened. I found things. She said, books, ledgers. They were stealing. From farmers. From the government. They were charging for shipping that never happened. They were inflating costs, the same way they are doing to you. But it was millions. She was shaking now, not from cold. I told my supervisor, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was so stupid. The next day, that man came, the one in the black coat. He is a Pinkerton agent. He was not there to investigate. He was there to silence me. He told me I had seen nothing. He told me that girls who see too much, they fall into the river. They disappear. Samuel's hands had clenched into fists. I ran. I took all my money. I just ran. I saw your letter in an agency office. It sounded far away. It sounded honest. I thought I could come here. I thought I could disappear. She looked at him, her face full of a new kind of shame. He is not here just for your land, Samuel. He is here for me. The rail and cattle company cannot have a witness. They cannot have their fraud exposed. I did not run from the fight. I brought it to your door. Samuel stared at the barn wall. The pieces clicked into place. The threats from Kellen, the constant pressure, the fire. Maybe the fire was not an accident. They were not just trying to force him out. They were trying to flush her out, or bury them both. He was not just a rancher in debt. He was a man sheltering a witness. He did not say, "It is all right." He did not say, "Do not worry." He looked at her. His face was hard, but his eyes were not angry. They were something else. They were focused. You did not bring this fight, he said, his voice a low rumble. You just showed us what the fight really is. It is not just about land, it is about thieves. He took the blanket from his own shoulders. He draped it over hers. She was now wrapped in both. We will not run, he said. It was a vow. They sat in silence for a long time. The storm raged, but the worst of it was over. Inside the small barn, a new alliance was formed. A man and a woman, no longer strangers. They were partners. They were conspirators. The dawn was pale and wet. The world was a sea of mud. The rain had washed the ash of the fire away. It had scoured the land. It had scoured their pretenses. The air was clean, but the danger was clearer than ever. When they went to town 2 days later, the world had changed. The rail and cattle company was not subtle. Men were tacking flyers to every post. Fair prices for your land. Cash today. A new start. It was a predatory move, aimed at every rancher weakened by the fire and the flood. Sheriff Kellen was in the land office. His voice was loud. He was talking to 2 other ranchers. The bank is patient, but it cannot wait forever. These disasters, they show how unstable this valley is. If you cannot make your payments, we will have to start foreclosure proceedings. It was a coordinated attack, propaganda and legal threats. They went to Boyd's store. Carter was there. He was talking to the Pinkerton agent, the man in the black coat. Carter was pointing at Samuel's wagon. He was talking. The Pinkerton handed him a silver dollar. Carter felt brave. He saw Samuel and Elena walk in. He swaggered over. His voice was slick with malice. "Well, well, Harper. Heard you 2 got real close in the storm. Spent the whole night in the barn." He leered at Elna. "I guess you are finally getting your money's worth from your purchase." Elena flinched. The color drained from her face. Samuel did not say a word. He did not threaten. He moved. He crossed the space in 2 strides. He grabbed the front of Carter's shirt. He lifted him off his feet. He slammed him against the wall. Sacks of flour tumbled to the floor. The entire store went silent. "I told you to show respect." Samuel's voice was not loud. It was deadly. "This is my wife. You will not speak of her. You will not look at her." He shoved him again, harder. Carter's head hit the wood. Samuel let him go. Carter slid to the floor, a whimpering coward. The Pinkerton agent watched from the corner. His face was impassive. He had learned what he needed to know. Harper would fight for her. Samuel turned. He put his arm on Elena's back. He guided her out of the store. He had declared himself. This was his wife. This was his fight. They were almost home. They were riding in the wagon. The tension was a 3rd person sitting between them. Chayton stepped out from a stand of willows. He blocked the road. His face was urgent. He spoke to Samuel, but his eyes were on the danger. "The surveyors, they are not waiting. They have armed guards. They are in Red Hollow. They are driving stakes into the burial grounds." Samuel's hand went to the rifle by his seat. Chayton shook his head. "Too many. The man in the black coat is with them. My people are watching. We will fight them tonight. The spirits of our ancestors demand it." Blood, Samuel thought. Kellen would use it as an excuse. A massacre. "Wait," Elena said. Her voice was shaking, but it was clear. Chayton looked at her. "Do not fight them. Not with arrows. Not tonight." He scowled. "They defile our land." "And we will stop them," she said, "but not that way. That is what they want. They want you to attack. They want the sheriff to have a reason." She looked at Samuel. Her mind was working. The accountant, the witness, the county judge. She said, "He is at Fort Grant. He is inspecting the railroad line. He is not Kellen. He is not owned by the company." "What good is a judge?" Samuel said. "We file a petition, an injunction," she said. "We tell him the rail and cattle company is attempting to destroy a cemetery, a sacred burial ground. It is against county law. It is against federal law." Samuel stared at her. "We cannot win with guns," she said. Her hand rested on the ledger book she always carried. "But we can win with the truth. We can win with the law." Chayton looked at the small woman. He saw her courage. It was a different kind. It was not the courage of a warrior. It was the courage of a mind. He was skeptical, but he saw Samuel look at her. He saw the new trust in the rancher's eyes. "One day," Chayton said, "I will hold my warriors for one day. Then we do what is necessary." He melted back into the trees. Elena looked at Samuel. "We have to ride to Fort Grant. We have to ride now." The seed of a new fight, a legal fight, was planted. The ranch was a humming hive of desperate energy. The one day Chayton had promised was a ticking clock. The news of the armed surveyors in Red Hollow had changed everything. The fight was no longer a distant threat. It was here. It was now. Samuel moved first. He was a man of action. He understood cattle. He understood cash. He spent the afternoon rounding up the half-dozen spring calves. They were young, too young to sell for a good price, but a low price was better than no price. He also loaded the last of the high meadow hay onto the wagon. He would not go to Fort Grant. That was too far, too slow. He would sell to the livery in Clearwater. He would take whatever they offered. He needed liquid money. He needed to be able to walk into the land office and slap silver dollars on the counter. He needed to pay a portion of the tax, any portion. To delay the foreclosure Sheriff Kellen had threatened, it was a purely economic move, a defense. Elena moved second. She was a woman of paper. She understood law. She understood persuasion. She rode the wagon with Samuel into Clearwater, while he haggled with the livery owner. She walked to Boyd's general store. Her ink-stained ledger was tucked under her arm. Mr. Boyd was alone. He was sweeping the floor. He stopped when he saw her face. "It is happening now," she said. "There was no preamble. The surveyors are in Red Hollow, with armed guards." Boyd's face went gray. He leaned on his broom. "What can we do? Chayton's people will be massacred." "That is what the Rail and Cattle Company wants," she said. "A reason to call in the cavalry. We must give them a different fight." She opened her ledger on the counter. She had already drafted the petition. Her handwriting was clear and strong. It cited County Ordinance 27, the one protecting burial grounds and places of worship. She explained about the county judge at Fort Grant. Boyd read it. He nodded slowly. "This is good. This is law." He reached for a pen. "I will sign." "We need more," Elena said. "We need other landowners, men who are also being cheated by the company's shipping fees." Boyd's face fell. He looked out the window. He saw two ranchers, men he had known for 20 years. They saw him. They saw Elena. They turned their faces away. They crossed the street. "They are afraid, Elena," he said. "Kellen has them all. And the man in the black coat, the Pinkerton. He has been buying drinks, making promises to some, threats to others. Then we go to them." For an hour, they walked the dusty street. They went to the blacksmith. He was too busy. He would not look them in the eye. They went to the feed store. The owner claimed he could not read. They went to two other small ranches on the edge of town. The doors were closed. The curtains were drawn. They returned to the store. Elena's shoulders slumped. Only one signature. Mr. Boyd's. "It is not enough," she said. Her voice was flat with defeat. Mr. Boyd looked at the petition. He looked at Elena. He went to his own desk. He pulled out a stack of invoices. His own shipping receipts from the Rail and Cattle Company. "You are right," he said. "One name is not enough, but my name. Plus these, He tapped the invoices. "Proof of the fraud you were talking about. And one more thing." He went into his back room. He returned with a small, scared-looking man. The man wore spectacles. He was drowning in a suit that was too large. "This is Mr. Hemlock," Boyd said. "He arrived on the stage yesterday. He used to be an accountant for the grain company in Chicago." Elena's heart stopped. She looked at the man. She knew him. He had worked in the office 3 desks down from her. "Hemlock," she breathed. He looked at her. Recognition dawned. "Miss Morris, I thought you were dead." She finished. "They told you I had an accident." He nodded, shaking. "When I heard what they did, when I saw them clear your desk, I knew I was next. I took what I could. I ran. I have a cousin in California. I was just passing through." Boyd put a hand on his shoulder. "I found him in the saloon. He was drinking himself into a state of panic. He told me his story. He told me about you." Elena looked at the petition, then at Hemlock. "Mr. Hemlock, will you testify?" He shrank back. "No, I cannot. That Pinkerton. He is here. I saw him. He will kill me. He will kill us all." Elena touched his arm. Her hand was gentle, but firm. "They will kill us if we are alone," she said, "but they cannot kill the law. Not if the judge sees. We are not alone. not anymore. She did not know if it was true, but she said it. Chayton moved third. He was a man of the earth. He was in Red Hollow. He stood hidden. He watched the surveyors. They were loud. They were profane. They hammered wooden stakes into the soft earth between the low mounds of rock. The sacred mounds. The Pinkerton agent was there. He sat on his horse. He smoked a cigar. He watched his men. Sheriff Kellen was with him. They were laughing. Chayton felt a cold rage. It was a clean, pure thing. He wanted to send an arrow into the throat of the man in the black coat. His warriors were in the rocks above. They waited for his signal. Their bows were strung. He held up his hand. Wait. He was torn. His entire being screamed for battle, for the defense of his ancestors, to wash this insult away with blood. But he had given his word. One day, he saw the woman, Elena. He saw her face. He heard her words. That is what they want. He made a decision. It was the hardest of his life. He would betray his traditions to save them. He spoke to his warriors, not with arrows, with stone. They came down from the ridges, not as fighters, but as builders, as mourners. He walked out into the open. The surveyors stopped. They reached for their rifles. The Pinkerton agent's hand dropped to his pistol. Chayton did not stop. He walked to the nearest grave, a low mound of red stones. He knelt. He took a stone from the earth. He placed it on top. He found another. He placed it. He was building a cairn, a marker, a visible sign that even a blind white man could not mistake for a simple pile of rocks. His warriors followed. They did not bring weapons. They came into the hollow. They began to build. They stacked the stones. They made the graves visible. They were exposing their most sacred secrets. They were turning their holy ground into a white man's cemetery. It felt like a desecration, but it was the only way. The Pinkerton agent watched. He was confused. This was not the attack he expected. Sheriff Kellen rode over. "What in blazes are you doing?" Chayton did not look up. He placed another stone. "We are honoring our dead," he said, in a way you can understand. Kellen spat. "You are wasting your time. This land belongs to the railroad." "The land belongs to the spirits," Chayton said. The Pinkerton agent laughed. "Spirits do not sign deeds." He and Kellen rode back to the surveyors. They were nervous. They did not like this silent, accusing work. They stopped hammering. They just watched. The sun began to set. The hollow was filled with the sound of stones being placed. It was the sound of a choice being made. That night, the ranch kitchen was a fortress, a command center. The rain from the storm had returned, a cold, steady drizzle. It dripped from the eaves. Samuel returned. He was soaked. He was tired. He had sold the calves. He had sold the hay. He had been cheated, but he did not care. He put a heavy leather pouch on the table. It was not much, but it was enough to stop a foreclosure. It was his part of the plan. Elena was there. She had her petition. It had 3 signatures, her own, Mr. Boyd's, and, miraculously, Mr. Hemlock's. The small accountant had found a sliver of courage. Eliana also had Boyd's invoices and a sworn statement from Hemlock, written in his panicked script, detailing the fraud he had witnessed. It was her part of the plan. They sat at the table. The oil lamp flickered. The mood was electric. Tomorrow, they would ride to Fort Grant. They would find the judge. They would present their case. Chayton would meet them at the mouth of the valley. He would guide them. He would bring his own evidence. The stones. Samuel looked at his rifle. It was leaning against the wall. The temptation was so strong. To take the rifle. To ride to Red Hollow. To end this, the direct way. The way a man was supposed to. He looked at the pouch of money. He looked at Elena's stack of papers. This was a new way. A woman's way. A way of paper and words. He was not comfortable with it. He was a man of earth and action. Elena was terrified. She kept seeing the Pinkerton's face. She knew what he was. He was a man who made problems disappear. Tomorrow, she was not just a mail-order bride. She was Elena Morris, the witness. She was making herself the target. She was afraid, but she looked at Samuel. She saw the new well. She saw the burned barn. She saw the man who had stood up for her in the store. Her fear was not as strong as her resolve. They were quiet for a long time. The only sound was the rain and the low hiss of the lamp. Elena looked at Samuel. His face was a mask of exhaustion and conflict. She moved her chair closer to his. The small kitchen felt like the only safe place in the world. She leaned in, so close he could feel the warmth of her breath. He could smell the soap on her skin. She put her hand on his. Her fingers were calloused, but her touch was soft. She looked into his eyes. She saw the war inside him. She whispered. Her voice was for him alone, a sound beneath the rain. "We're alone now, time to do what's necessary." The words hung in the air. They were a signal. It was time to stop planning. It was time to act, but it was more. It was an oath. It was an admission. We are alone. Not I am alone. Not you are alone. We. In that moment, the paper contract, the awkwardness, it all burned away. They were two people, a single unit, against the world. It was a marriage vow, more real than any church could provide. He did not speak. He turned his hand. He laced his fingers with hers. He looked at her. He saw the woman who had fought fire, the woman who had fought a storm, the woman who was now willing to fight a corporation. He leaned in. He kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not a kiss of tentative romance. It was deep. It was desperate. It was a kiss of sealing a bargain. It was a kiss of fear and courage. It tasted of coffee and rain and the dust of the valley. It was a promise of survival. It was a claim. The lamp on the table flickered. The flame dipped. It almost went out. Then it flared, brighter than before. She pulled back just an inch. Her eyes were shining. He let go of her hand. He stood. He was no longer conflicted. He was a man with a purpose. He took his pouch of money. Elena stood. She took her small ledger, the one with Hemlock's statement, the one with the petition. She took a thin leather thong. She wrapped it around the book. She pulled the knot tight. She was binding her courage. She was making it a solid thing, a weapon. There was a soft scratch at the door. Samuel opened it. Chayton was standing in the rain. He was a shadow. He had come to guide them. He looked at Samuel. He looked at Elena. He saw the new light between them. He did not speak of it. He held out his hand to Samuel. In it was his own hunting knife. It was heavy. The blade was sharp. The handle was worn smooth by his own grip. "You will stand on my father's land tomorrow," Chayton said. "You will carry a piece of it with you." Samuel took the knife. It was not a weapon for the fight. It was a symbol. It was a bond of trust, deeper than words. The three of them stood in the doorway. The rain had stopped. The air was cold. The first hint of a gray dawn was on the horizon. Samuel had his pouch of silver, the rancher's defense. Elena had her leather-bound book, the accountant's attack. Chayton had his knowledge, the warrior's sacred ground. They did not speak. They moved out into the cold morning. Three small figures, each carrying a different part of the burden. They moved toward Red Hollow. They moved toward the judge. They moved toward the fight. The dawn broke cold and sharp. The air in the high country was thin. Chayton led them. He moved with a purpose that was both silent and terrible. Samuel walked beside him. He felt the weight of the leather pouch heavy with coins. It was his anchor, his defense. He also felt the weight of Chayton's knife at his belt. It felt heavier than the silver. It was a different kind of burden, a bond. Elena walked just behind them. Her leather-bound ledger was held tight against her chest. It was her shield and her weapon. Every step was an act of will. She had run from Chicago. She had run from the man in the black coat. Now she was walking directly toward him. Her fear was a cold sickness in her stomach, but she looked at the back of Samuel Harper, the set of his shoulders, the man who had faced fire for her, the man who had claimed her as his wife. She drew strength from him. She would not fail him. They heard Red Hollow before they saw it, the sound of hammers, the sharp metallic ring of stakes being driven into the earth, the sound of men's voices, loud, careless, laughing. It was a sound of desecration. Chayton stopped at the mouth of the hollow. He held up his hand. Samuel and Elena stopped beside him. They saw the scene. The hollow was a hive of activity. 20 men, surveyors. They moved across the land. They carried their tripods and chains. Armed guards stood with them, rifles held loosely, confident. In the center, on horseback, sat Sheriff Kellen and the Pinkerton agent, the man Elena knew. His name was Thorne. He was smoking a cigar. His black coat was immaculate. He looked bored. He looked powerful. And there was something else. All through the hollow, standing beside the low mounds of rock, were Chayton's people, 24 warriors. They were not armed for war. They held no bows, no rifles. They just stood, silent. They were witnesses. Beside each grave, they had finished their work. They had stacked new stones. The new cairns were bright and stark in the morning light. They looked like teeth. They were a visible, undeniable claim. Kellen saw them. His face turned a dark red. He spurred his horse forward. Thorne followed, his expression unchanged. "What is the meaning of this?" Kellen shouted. His voice was too loud. "I told you to disperse. This is railroad property." Chayton stepped forward. He stood in the path of the horse. "This is not railroad property, Sheriff," he said. His voice was not loud, but it was the voice of the hollow itself. "This is the sacred ground of the Kayawatawa. It is a burial ground. You are on our land." Thorne rode up beside Kellen. He looked down at Chayton, a look of complete disinterest. "A burial ground," he said. His voice was smooth. "I see a pile of rocks." Chayton did not rise to the taunt. He had prepared for this. He was a man of the earth, but he would use the white man's way, evidence. He pointed to the new cairns. "These are the graves of our fathers." He bent down. He picked up a flat stone. It was carved with a symbol, a spiral. He held it up. "This is our mark." He pointed to a bundle of eagle feathers, tied to a tall stick. It had been placed in the center of the hollow. "That is our church." Kellen laughed. A short, ugly bark. "Your church?" Elena stepped forward. She moved to stand beside Chayton. Samuel moved with her. He stood at her shoulder. She was terrified. She could feel Thorne's eyes on her, but her voice was steady. "He is correct, Sheriff." Kellen looked at her, stunned by her nerve. "You, the mail-order bride, you are telling me the law." Elena held up the leather-bound book. "This is a formal petition. It is addressed to Judge Miller at Fort Grant. It cites County Ordinance 27. It states, and I read, it is illegal for any person or corporation to desecrate, disturb, or otherwise damage any known cemetery, burial ground, or place of worship." She looked directly at Kellen. "You are in violation of the law." Kellen was speechless. He looked at the paper. He looked at her. Thorne was no longer bored. He was leaning forward on his saddle. He was studying Elena. His eyes narrowed. He recognized the tone, the precision, the audacity. He had heard it once before, in an office in Chicago. Kellen found his voice. He was furious. He was being humiliated. "This is nonsense." He dismounted. He strode toward Chayton. He shoved him hard in the chest. "Get out of the way, you savage!" Chayton did not move. He was rooted to the ground. He had taken the blow. His eyes were burning. Kellen was enraged. He lost all control. He drew his pistol. He did not aim at Chayton. He fired it into the air. The shot was a cannon blast in the small hollow. "I said disperse," he screamed. This is an unlawful assembly. The situation snapped. The surveyors raised their rifles. Chaitin's warriors tensed. Their hands went to the knives at their belts. This was it. The massacre was about to begin. Samuel moved. He stepped between Kellen and Chaitin. He was no longer a rancher. He was a wall. No more, he said. He took Chaitin's heavy knife from his belt. He did not point it. He did not threaten. He threw it on the ground. It landed in the red dust. Between him and Kellen, a gesture of peace, of defiance. He held his hands out. Empty. You want this land, he said. His voice was a low growl. You want to cross? You will have to come through me first. Thorn had been staring at Elena. The voice, the law, the ledger book. It all connected. He remembered the small, mousy accountant, the one who had disappeared. Miss Morris, he said softly, then louder. Elena Morris. He smiled, a cold, thin smile that did not touch his eyes. I thought you had an accident. I thought you fell into the river. Elena's blood went cold. He knew. It was over. Thorn looked at Kellen. His voice was sharp, full of authority. Sheriff, forget these vagrants. Arrest her. Kellen was confused. Arrest who? Harper? The woman. Thorn pointed. She is a fugitive from justice, wanted for theft in Chicago. That is a lie? Elena's voice was a whisper. Thorn did not look at her. He looked at Kellen. I am an agent of the Pinkerton Detective Agency. I am acting on federal authority. I am deputizing you. Arrest her now. This was a new target, a target Kellen understood. He holstered his pistol. He grabbed Elena's arm. His fingers were like a steel trap. You are under arrest, ma'am. Elena cried out, No! Samuel roared. It was not a human sound. It was the sound of pure rage. He did not think. He moved. He shoved Kellen, hard. He threw the sheriff off Elena. You will not touch my wife. Kellen stumbled back. He tripped. He fell to one knee. He was enraged. He brought his pistol up, not at the sky. He aimed it at Samuel's chest. Thorn had drawn his own gun. He was aiming at Samuel. He saw his chance. He could eliminate the witness and the obstacle. 2 problems solved with 1 bullet. A figure was running, scrambling down the rocks. It was Carter. He had followed them from town. He had been watching. He saw Kellen aim. He saw Thorn aim. Thorn was taking careful aim at Samuel's back. No! Carter screamed. He lunged. He was clumsy, but he was desperate. He slammed into Thorn's arm just as the agent fired. The shot went wild. It screamed off the rocks. Thorn cursed. He backhanded Carter. He sent him sprawling to the ground. The hollow exploded into chaos. Samuel was wrestling with Kellen for the gun. They crashed to the ground. A surveyor, one of the armed guards, saw Elena. He saw her as the cause. He lunged. He grabbed her. He tried to pull her toward Thorn. Chaitin moved. He was a blur. He was not there to kill. He was there to disarm. He grabbed the surveyor's rifle. He twisted it, a sharp, snapping sound. The man screamed. His wrist was broken. Chaitin threw the rifle away. Then a new sound. It was not a gunshot. It was shouting, and a bell. A loud, rhythmic clanging. A crowd was pouring into the hollow. Mr. Boyd was at the front. He was carrying a large cast-iron dinner bell. He was ringing it with all his might. "Stop this!" Boyd yelled. "In the name of the law! Stop this!" Behind him were 20 people from Clearwater. The blacksmith, his face grim. He was holding his largest hammer. The 2 ranchers who had looked away. They were here now. Their wives were with them. They were holding pitchforks. They were holding shovels. They were not an army. They were a community. They were witnesses. Kellen froze. He let go of Samuel. Thorn froze. His gun was still in his hand. The surveyors lowered their weapons. They looked at the angry crowd. They were outnumbered. A tense silence fell. The only sound was Boyd's bell. Clang, clang, clang. Then the wind rose. It did not gust, it swirled. A small whirlwind. A dust devil. It spun up from the center of the hollow. It was red with the sacred dust. It moved across the new stone cairns. It made a low whistling sound. A hollow, mournful sound, like a drum. A stone drum. It was the sound of the earth itself. The surveyors backed away. They were spooked. This place was wrong. Thorn was livid. His clean coat was covered in dust. He looked at the crowd. He could not shoot them all. He had lost control. Kellen got to his feet. He was breathing hard. He tried to regain his authority. He still had his pistol. He pointed it at Elena. "She is under arrest. I am taking her in." Samuel stood in front of Elena. He shielded her with his body. He was bleeding from a cut on his cheek. He said nothing. He just dared Kellen to shoot. Mr. Boyd stopped ringing the bell. He walked forward. "By what authority, Sheriff?" "By his authority?" Kellen pointed at Thorn. "He is a Pinkerton." Boyd's voice was a deep boom. "He has no authority here, not over us. We are citizens of this county. And you," he pointed a finger at Kellen, "you fired on an unarmed man. You assaulted a woman. You are protecting the thieves who have been robbing us." The blacksmith spoke. His voice was gravel. "Boyd is right. Another rancher. We want Judge Miller. We want the real law." Mr. Boyd stood face to face with Kellen. "We demand you give that badge to a deputy. You will wait for the judge. You are suspended." Kellen looked at the crowd. He looked at Thorn. Thorn gave him no help. He was on his own. "You cannot do this." Kellen's voice was weak. The blacksmith stepped forward. He held the hammer. It was heavy in his hand. "Give us the badge, Kellen," he said, "or we will take it." Kellen looked at their faces. They were not angry. They were resolved. His power, the power given to him by the railroad, was gone. It had been an illusion. Slowly, his hands shaking with rage, he unpinned the tin star from his chest. He threw it on the ground. It landed in the dust, next to Chayton's knife. Thorn holstered his pistol. He calmly brushed the dust from his coat. He looked at Elena. He looked at Samuel. "This is not over," he said. He nodded to his surveyors. "Pack your things." He walked to his horse. He mounted it. He looked at the crowd. He looked at Elena. "You are all obstructing federal business. I will be back," he said. His voice was calm. "And I will have warrants for every single one of you." He turned his horse. He rode out of the hollow. His men followed him. They were a defeated army. A small, ragged cheer went up from the crowd. They were left, the three of them, and the townsfolk, and the disgraced sheriff. Elena was shaking so hard she could not stand. Samuel put his arm around her. He pulled her against his side. He held her tight. He was no longer just her partner. He was her protector. He was her husband. They had won. For today, they had created a space, a pause. Now they had to wait for the real law. The message Mr. Boyd had sent to Fort Grant, carried by his fastest delivery boy, had intercepted Judge Miller on the road. The judge was a man who understood the smell of gunpowder and the stink of corruption. Instead of proceeding to the fort, his carriage, escorted by 2 territorial marshals, turned toward Clearwater. He arrived in the late afternoon. The town was a powder keg, holding its breath. He did not go to the sheriff's office. He did not go to the saloon. He went to Boyd's general store. It was the only neutral ground. Within an hour, Boyd had cleared the center of the room. Benches were dragged in. The store's long counter became the judge's bench. Judge Miller was a lean man. He had a gray beard and eyes that had seen too much. He sat. He banged a small gavel. The store was packed. Every citizen who had been in the hollow was there. And more. They stood on barrels. They crowded the aisles. In the front row sat Elena, Samuel, and Chayton. Across the aisle sat the lawyer from the Rail and Cattle Company, a man named Sullivan. He looked calm. He looked expensive. Beside him, looking small and rumpled, was Kellen. He wore no badge. "I have read Mr. Boyd's urgent message." The judge's voice was dry. "It speaks of armed conflict, suspended lawmen, and burial grounds. This is not a formal court. This is an emergency hearing. I will hear the petitioners first." Elena stood. Her legs were shaking. She held the leather-bound ledger. She walked to the counter. "Your Honor," her voice was low, but clear. "We are here to ask for an injunction, to stop the Rail and Cattle Company from illegally destroying a cemetery." Sullivan, the lawyer, stood up. "Objection! Your Honor, this is preposterous. There is no cemetery, just a patch of worthless rock. This is a tactic to stop progress, to stop the railroad that will bring prosperity to this very town. I will be the judge of what is preposterous." "Counsel," Judge Miller said. He looked at Elena. "Proof, ma'am." "Chayton," Elena said. Chayton moved. He did not look at the crowd. He looked only at the judge. He placed the flat stone, the one with the spiral carving, on the counter. He placed the bundle of eagle feathers beside it. "This is Red Hollow?" Chayton spoke. His voice was deep. "It is the place where we have buried our grandfathers for 1,000 moons. The stones are our markers. The feathers are our prayers. The land is our church. The railroad men drive their metal stakes through the hearts of our ancestors. It is a sacred place, and they are violating it." Sullivan scoffed. "Your Honor, superstition, folklore. The Kiowa have no deed. They have no title. The land was granted to the railroad by the territorial government. They have this—" Elena's voice cut through the air. She held up her petition, County Ordinance 27, which protects all places of worship and all burial grounds. It does not say Christian burial grounds. It does not say burial grounds with deeds. It says all. She pushed the paper toward the judge. "Furthermore," she said, not waiting for Sullivan, "this is not about progress. It is about greed." She opened her own ledger. She placed Mr. Boyd's fraudulent invoices beside it. "This is why they want that specific land. It is the cheapest route, and they are desperate to cut costs because they are committing systematic fraud." "Objection," Sullivan shouted. "This is slander. This woman is a disgruntled former employee, a runaway. She is wanted for theft in Chicago." "That is a lie," Elena said, her voice rising. "I am a witness, not a thief. Agent Thorne, the Pinkerton. He threatened me. He forced me to run." "A convenient story," Sullivan sneered. "Where is this Agent Thorne? He seems to have vanished, along with his accusations." The crowd murmured. Sullivan was right. Thorne was gone. It was Elena's word against a powerful corporation. The judge looked at Elena. His face was hard. "These are serious accusations. Mrs. Harper, you claim this company is engaged in criminal activity." "Yes, sir. They are inflating shipping costs, charging for services never rendered. They are robbing every rancher in this valley. Mr. Harper's debts are not from drought. They are from theft." "And you have no proof," Sullivan smiled. "Just your own desperate words." A voice squeaked from the back of the store. "She is telling the truth." Every head turned. "Mr. Hemlock pushed his way through the crowd. He was pale. He was sweating. He looked like he was going to be sick, but he was walking. He stood beside Elena. He did not look at her. He looked at the floor. "Who are you?" the judge asked. "My name was Arthur Hemlock. I was a senior accountant at the grain company in Chicago. I worked with Miss Morris." Sullivan's face had gone pale. "I did not run," Hemlock whispered. "He was shaking. I stayed. I was afraid. Agent Thorne, he told me to fix the books. He told me Miss Morris had an accident. He said I should not have an accident too." He was fumbling in his coat. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, a letter. "I did what he said. I changed the numbers. I helped them steal." But I kept this. He handed the letter to the judge. It is from my supervisor, an order. It tells me to reconcile the Western Territory accounts. It specifically mentions hiding the extra fees. It is signed by the vice president. He looked up. His eyes were full of tears. He looked at Elena. I am so sorry, Miss Morris. I was a coward. This was the fatal blow. The connection, the motive, the proof. It was not just a local land dispute. It was a criminal conspiracy. The store was tomb silent. Judge Miller read the letter. He read it twice. His face was granite. He looked at Sullivan. Counsel, this is a sworn affidavit from Mr. Hemlock, detailing his confession, and this is a direct order to commit fraud. Do you have anything to say? Sullivan was packing his briefcase. He was a professional. He knew when the game was lost. The Rail and Cattle Company will cooperate with any official investigation. Your Honor, as for this hearing, we will, of course, abide by your ruling. Judge Miller looked at him. You will indeed. Be seated. The judge stood. He spoke to the entire room. This hearing is concluded. This court hereby rules as follows. His voice was a gavel. First, an immediate injunction is placed on all activities of the Rail and Cattle Company within Red Hollow. All survey work, all construction, is to cease and desist. That land will be held in trust, pending a full investigation by the territorial government into the claims of the Kiowa-Tawa people. A low cheer started. Chayton closed his eyes. He put his hand on the carved stone. Second, the judge continued. Based on the testimony of Mrs. Harper and Mr. Hemlock, and the evidence provided, I am ordering a full criminal investigation into the billing practices of the Rail and Cattle Company in this county. The cheer grew louder. Third, the judge looked at Samuel. Mr. Harper, this court grants you, and any other rancher who wishes to apply, a 90-day stay on all tax and bank payments. The county assessor is hereby ordered to recalculate all debts based on legitimate shipping costs, these fraudulent fees. He held up Boyd's invoices, are declared null and void. This time, the room exploded. The blacksmith was roaring. Mr. Boyd was hugging his wife. Samuel grabbed Elena's arm. He did not pull her close. He just held on, as if to make sure she was real. The judge banged his gavel. Order. He looked at Kellen. The former sheriff was trying to slide out of the room. Mr. Kellen, this court upholds your suspension by the citizens of Clearwater. You will be held for investigation. For your role in this conspiracy, for aiding and abetting criminal fraud, and for discharging your firearm in a manner threatening to the public peace. The two marshals who had come with the judge moved. They flanked Kellen. He was no longer a threat. He was a prisoner. Sullivan and Kellen were let out. The crowd parted. They hissed. They did not touch them, but they let them know. The power had shifted. Clearwater was their town again. The rest was a blur. People crowded around them. They were shaking Samuel's hand. They were clapping him on the back. They were looking at Elena with awe. This small woman, this mail-order bride. She had faced down the railroad. Mr. Hemlock was sitting on a sack of flour, his head in his hands, weeping with relief. Chayton had disappeared. He had not waited for thanks. He had gone back to the hollow to tell the spirits. That night, the ranch was quiet. The moon was a silver disk in a clear sky. The air was cool and sweet. Samuel and Elena sat on the porch. They had not spoken for an hour. They just sat. They listened to the sound of the windmill, the steady groan that was no longer lonely. It was the sound of their life. He had the leather pouch of silver on the bench between them. He had never needed it. She had her leather-bound ledger in her lap. It had been their only weapon. He stood up. He walked to the edge of the porch. He looked out at the land. It was his, truly his. He was not just the man who had inherited it. He was the man who had fought for it. Elena stood beside him. She was not the woman who had arrived on the train. The woman looking for shelter. She was a woman who had built a home. He turned to her. His face was shadowed. He did not have the words. He was not a man of words. He was a man of action, of fire, of earth. He reached out. His hand was rough, calloused. He did not touch her face. He touched the side of her hair, gently. Then he leaned in. He rested his forehead against hers. He breathed in. He could smell the soap on her skin. He could feel her warmth. "Elena," he whispered. It was the only word he had. "We are home," she whispered back. It was not a question. It was a fact. It was a vow. It was the end of a long journey, and the beginning of a new one. They stood there, under the vast western sky. Two people, no longer alone. They were a family. The sun rose the next morning. It painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. From the porch of the Harper Ranch, you could see the valley. You could see the high plains, and you could see the place where the railroad tracks stopped. They ended in the red dust, miles from the sacred mouth of Red Hollow. The days that followed the hearing were quiet, but it was a new kind of quiet. It was not the heavy, oppressive silence of fear. It was not the empty silence of loneliness. It was the quiet of a fever that has broken. It was the sound of a valley catching its breath and beginning to heal. The work of the ranch resumed, but its purpose had changed. Samuel no longer worked with the desperate energy of a man holding back a flood. He worked with the steady hands of a man building a foundation. The 90-day stay on his debts was a shield. The voiding of the fraudulent fees was a new beginning. He was a free man on his own land. The first task was one of honor. He loaded his wagon with fence posts and wire. He rode to Red Hollow. He expected to work alone. He found Chayton waiting for him. The Kiowa warrior carried no weapons. He simply stood by the new stone cairns. He had brought his own tools, hatchets and long strips of rawhide. They did not speak of the hearing. They did not speak of the victory. They just looked at the land. Samuel started to dig the first post hole. At the mouth of the hollow, Chayton stopped him. He put his hand on the post. "Not here," he said. He walked 20 yards back. He drew a line in the red dust with his heel. "Here, the land must be allowed to breathe." For 3 days, the two men worked. Samuel set the posts, the rancher's mark of possession, but Chayton bound the rails. He did not use wire. He used the rawhide. He tied them with a complex knot, a knot of respect. They were not building a fence to keep people out. They were building a boundary, a line of preservation. It was a strange fence. It was part white man's timber, part native binding. It was a symbol of the new alliance, built by the two men who had the most to lose and the most to gain. While the men healed the land, Elena began to heal the future. She was an accountant. She was a woman of letters, and she saw the deepest wound in the valley. It was the wound of ignorance. It was the weapon the rail and cattle company had used. She cleared out the small, unused bunkhouse behind the main home. It was small. It was full of dust and old saddles, but it had a roof and a floor. She spoke to Samuel that night. Her voice was firm. "I'm starting a school." Samuel looked up from his plate. He was tired from the fencing. "A school." "For the children in the valley," she said. "They need to read. They need to know their numbers." He nodded. It was a good idea. He could think of 4 families that would send their children. "All the children," Elena said. He paused. He understood. "You mean Chayton's people?" He said, "It was not a question." "They need it more than we do," she said. "They must learn to read the white man's paper magic, or they will always be cheated. They will always lose their land." It was a delicate thing. Samuel knew the Kiowa were proud. They would not see it as a gift. They might see it as an insult. Another attempt to wash their children white. Elena rode to the hills. She went alone. She found Chayton. She did not ask him. She told him. She explained her reasoning, just as she had to Samuel. Chayton listened. He looked at this small woman. She had the courage of a warrior.
Our children learn the earth. He said, they learn the sky. They learn the horse.
And they must learn the book, she said. The book is the white man's arrow. I will teach them how to aim it.
He thought for a long time. He saw the wisdom. It was a bitter wisdom, but it was necessary.
One child, he said, my cousin's son. He is clever. He will come. If he is treated with respect, more will follow. The next week, the bunkhouse was clean. Elena had built a crude desk. She had 3 slates. A man was walking up the road to the ranch. He was not swaggering. He was walking with his head down. He carried a box of tools. Samuel saw him from the barn. He stepped out. His face was hard. He did not trust this. It was Carter. Carter stopped 10 feet away. He did not look at Samuel. He looked at the ground. He had not had a drink in a week. His hands were shaking. I heard you were building a school, he mumbled. Samuel just waited. Carter looked up. His eyes were miserable. He looked at Elena. She had come out onto the porch. Mrs. Harper, he said. The name was respectful. It was formal. What I did, in the store, in the hollow. I was a fool. I was a coward. I took that man's money. He pointed to Thorne. He said Thorne was gone. I wanted to be on the winning side. And I was wrong. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about your husband. He looked back at the ground. I am a good carpenter, he said. When I am well. I am a good carpenter. That bunkhouse is not fit for children. It needs a real floor. It needs windows. I will do it. I will not take a wage. I want to fix something. Samuel looked at Elena. This was her decision. Elena walked down from the porch. She stood in front of Carter. He flinched, as if he expected her to hit him. We have lumber, she said, stacked behind the barn. You can start with the windows. Carter's shoulders slumped with relief. He nodded. He did not say thank you. He just went to work. He was true to his word. He was a fine carpenter. He worked all day. For 2 days. He replaced the warped floor. He framed 2 proper windows. On the 3rd day, Chayton arrived. He was not there to see the school. He was there to bring the herbs Elena had asked for. He saw Carter. Carter froze. He put his hammer down. He wiped his sweaty hands on his pants. He walked over to Chayton. This was the hardest part. He stood before the Kiowa-Tawa warrior. I said things, he said. His voice was low. About your people. I called you names. I was wrong. I was ignorant. I am sorry. Chayton looked at him. His face was impassive. He was a man who had seen generations of men like Carter, full of poison, full of weakness. He looked at the new window frame. He saw the clean joints, the good wood. He looked back at Carter. The window is straight, he said. It was not forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement. It was a start. Carter nodded. He picked up his hammer. He went back to work. The old economy of the valley was broken. The rail and cattle company's monopoly was shattered. A new economy rose to take its place. It was the one Elena had started. Chayton's people brought things to Boyd's general store, not just for trade, but for cash. They brought cured deer hides, soft as cloth. They brought dried sage and medicinal herbs Chayton's mother had gathered. Elena brought her cheese. It was now famous in the valley. She brought fresh bread. She brought eggs. Boyd's store became the center of a new alliance. The ranchers' wives bought the herbs. The Kiowa-Tawa bought flour and sugar. The money that had once been drained away by the railroad now stayed in the valley. It moved from hand to hand. The glass jar on the Harper's mantel filled up. It was no longer a symbol of desperate hope. It was a fact. It was a savings. The silver dollars were joined by dimes and nickels. The sound when Elena dropped a coin in was no longer a lonely clink. It was a heavy, satisfying thud. The jar was heavy. It was the sound of a future.
The land itself was healing.
Samuel stood under the great oak tree, the one that had been scorched by the fire. He had been afraid it was dead. The entire north side was a black scar. He touched the rough, charred bark. He felt a deep sadness. It was his mother's tree. Elena came to stand beside him. She pointed.
"Look." He looked up. He had been so focused on the scar. He had not seen, high up, on the very top branches, a cluster of new leaves had unfurled. They were a brilliant, impossible green against the black branches. It was alive. He looked at the new well, the one Chayton had shown him. The water was sweet. It was not the iron-tasting water from the windmill. The garden beside the house was overflowing. The kitchen was full of food. The ranch was an oasis. It was reborn. The peace was real, but the past was not entirely buried. One morning, Samuel found it, a piece of paper, tucked into the handle of the barn door. It was not a letter from the post. It was a message. The handwriting was crude. It was hateful.
"The judge ain't here forever. Thorne has friends. Watch your backs." Samuel's hand crushed the paper. The old cold fear, the rage, it came back. He felt the phantom pain in his burned arm. He saw Thorne's cold smile. He took the note into the kitchen. He threw it on the table. Elena was packing lunches, one for him, and two small ones, for the first two students at her school, Chayton's cousin's son and the blacksmith's daughter. She saw his face. She uncurled the wadded paper. She read it. She did not gasp. She did not pale. The woman who had fled Chicago was gone. She looked at Samuel. Her eyes were calm. "He is gone, Samuel. This is just an echo. This is the sound a snake's tail makes after the head is cut off." She took the note. She walked to the wood stove. She lifted the iron lid. She dropped the paper in. They watched it curl, turn black, and vanish into ash. "We did the right thing," she said. Her voice was not shaking. It was a statement of fact. They were safe because they were not alone. The town needed to celebrate. Mr. Boyd declared it, a harvest festival, to give thanks for the peace, and the rain, and the new well. The place was obvious. The Harper Ranch, under the healing oak tree. They came, the entire town. They brought pies. They brought smoked hams. The blacksmith brought his fiddle. Mr. Hemlock, who had decided to stay and work as Mr. Boyd's accountant, brought a small bag of candy. Carter was there. He sat on the edge of the crowd. He was sober. He was quiet. He was just there. Part of the town. They ate. They laughed. It was a good party. Then, as the sun began to set, they arrived. Chayton and his family, his mother, his cousins, the boy who was Elena's student. They came on foot. They did not come empty-handed. They brought blankets. They brought smoked venison. They brought flat cornbread. An awkward silence fell over the party. The two groups stood separate. The old prejudice was a ghost, still lingering in the air. Elena did not hesitate. She took a loaf of her own fresh bread. She walked across the grass. She stopped in front of Chayton's mother, an old woman with eyes as wise as the hills. Elena offered the bread. The woman looked at it. She looked at Elena. A slow smile spread across her face. She took the bread. She offered Elena a piece of her own cornbread. The barrier was broken. The blacksmith started to play his fiddle, a fast, lively tune. From the Kiowa side, a man produced a small drum. He began to tap a rhythm, a slow, steady beat, the beat of a heart. The fiddler paused. He listened. He found the rhythm. He began to play again, his fast tune slowing, finding a harmony with the drum. The two musics, the settler's reel, the native's heartbeat, they mixed in the evening air. They were not one song, but they were no longer two. They were something new. Samuel stood by the porch. He watched his wife. She was sitting on a blanket. She was talking to Chayton's mother, the two children.
The white girl and the Kiowa boy were sharing a piece of candy. He felt a peace so profound, it was almost an ache. Late that night, the ranch was quiet. The guests were gone. The moon was high. Elena sat at the small desk in their room. She opened her ink-stained journal. She lit the lamp. She thought of the long year, the silence of Samuel's loneliness, her own silence of fear. She dipped her pen in the ink. She wrote a single line. The old silence has turned into peace. The wind still blew through Clearwater Valley. It was the same wind, but it no longer carried the taste of iron and ash. 5 years had passed. The year was 1883. The wind now carried the scent of rich soil and the sound of deep water, and in the late summer, it carried the smell of wheat. Samuel Harper had planted wheat in the lower meadow. The new well, the one Chayton had shown him, had made it possible. The old groaning windmill still turned, a monument to the past, but the new spring was the heart of the ranch. It pumped life into the land. There was another sound on the wind, the distant rumble and whistle of a locomotive, but it was far to the south. The railroad had come to the territory, but it had not come to Clearwater Valley, not in the way it had intended. The iron tracks, visible miles away, made a great expensive curve, a detour. The metal snake had been forced to bend. It went around the high country. It never touched the mouth of Red Hollow. The victory had been slow, but it was absolute. The federal investigation, fueled by the testimony of Mr. Hemlock and the evidence provided by Elena, had found the rail and cattle company guilty of massive fraud. The company's charter was revoked. Its assets were seized. Thorne, the man in the black coat, had been arrested in another state. He was tried for conspiracy and extortion. He would not see the West again for many years. The land was quiet. The victory was written on the map. The Harper Ranch was no longer just a ranch. The small house had grown. A new wing extended from the north side. It had wide windows. It was built of solid timber. Carter, who was now a full partner in the town's carpentry business, had built it. He was a sober man. He was a meticulous craftsman. He had built the extension as a wedding gift. The sign by the road, also carved by Carter, did not read Harper Ranch. It read Clearwater Creek Farm. That had been the idea of Elena. They were partners. In every sense, Samuel managed the fields of wheat and the herds of cattle. His beef was known as the best in the county. He was a man who understood earth. He was a man who understood water. He had learned patience. Elena managed the books. The books were now thick. The accounts were in order. The glass jar on the mantel was long since full. It had been replaced by a proper account at the new town bank, the bank run by Mr. Boyd. She also managed the dairy. Her cheese was sold as far away as the territorial capital. But her main work, her true work, was the school. The old bunkhouse was a memory. In its place stood a proper schoolhouse. It was one room, but it was bright. It was clean. It had a real stove for the winter and a porch for the summer. From the open door, you could hear the sound of voices. Not 2 children, 22. Elena stood before them. She was no longer the tired woman from the train. Her face was brown from the sun. Her hands were strong. She was the valley's teacher. She had children from every ranch. She had the children from the town. And every morning, 5 children from the people of Chayton rode down from the hills. They left their ponies in Samuel's corral. They sat at the new desks Carter had built. They learned their letters. They learned their numbers. Elena was a strict teacher, but she was a fair one. She taught them more than books. She taught them respect. The blacksmith's daughter learned a Kiowa word for the red-tailed hawk. The cousin of Chayton learned how to write his name, and he learned how to read a deed, and how to understand a contract. Elena was arming them with the white man's paper magic, as she had promised. Chayton was no longer just a guardian. He was a bridge between 2 worlds.
The county, after the great hearing, had officially recognized his position. He was the liaison for the Kiowa. He was paid a salary by the territory. He spoke for his people. He argued for their water rights. He ensured the treaties were honored. He was also the guardian of Red Hollow. The hollow was now a protected preserve, declared by the territorial government. No one could build there. No one could survey there. It was left to the spirits. Chayton would sometimes lead tours. He brought the new governor to the hollow. He brought Judge Miller. Whenever the judge returned, he showed them the cairns. He told them the stories. Some of them, the ones that were safe to tell, the ones that would build respect, the deepest secrets, the true heart of the place, those he kept for his people. He had learned the new way. You protected a thing by sharing just enough of it to make others see its value. But its soul, you kept hidden. You kept sacred. The love between Samuel and Elena was like the new well. It was deep. It was quiet. It was the source of everything. It was not a love of grand passions and loud declarations. It was a love of daily action. It was a love of doing. It was in the way he rose an hour before her, every winter morning, to light the stove in the schoolhouse, so it would be warm when she arrived. It was in the way she balanced the ranch books every single night, so he would never again feel the cold fear of debt. It was in the new, wider desk he built for her, because he saw her squinting at her papers. It was in the pot of coffee she kept hot for him, when he came in late from the fields. Their love was the foundation of the farm. It was loyalty. It was justice. It was the freedom they had earned. It was the responsibility they had chosen. It was the shared memory of fire, and of flood, and of the long fight. They stood together, under the great oak tree. The tree was a marvel. The fire scar was still there, a long dark line running up the north side, a memory of the battle. But the tree had not died. It had thrived. The canopy was enormous. It was thick and green. It was a testament to survival. Samuel had been working on something for a week, a plank of smooth cedar. He had carved it. Elena had painted the letters carefully, in dark blue. It was not a sign for the world. It was a reminder for themselves. He held it up. He hung it from a strong, low branch. The words were clear in the afternoon light. The plaque said that home is where we do what is necessary. They stood looking at it, their creed, their simple truth. A shadow fell. Chayton was there. He had come on foot. He had come to see. He looked at the ranch, the new buildings, the fields of wheat. He looked at the schoolhouse. He heard the sound of the children, his people's children, speaking English and Kiowa together. He looked at the plaque on the tree. He read the words. He nodded. He understood. He had brought a gift. He held it out. It was a small bundle, red cloth, woven by his mother. It held sacred tobacco and a sprig of dried sage. He did not speak. He reached up, high, to the first living branch that grew above the fire scar. He tied the bundle there, a bright splash of red against the green and black. It was an offering, a sign of thanks, to the tree, to the land, and to the two people who stood beneath it. 3 people, from 3 worlds, bound together by one piece of ground. The peace in the valley was profound. It was not a gift. It was an achievement. It was the deep quiet that follows a long storm. It was the warmth of the sun on a field that you have plowed and planted and protected. It was the peace of a job well done. The story of Red Hollow and the man and woman who had saved it became a quiet legend. New travelers, the ones who rode the railroad line far to the south. They would sometimes stop in Clearwater for supplies. They would hear whispers in Boyd's store, stories of the great hearing, of the corrupt sheriff, of the brave mail-order bride who was smarter than a railroad lawyer. And some travelers, the curious ones, would ride out toward the hills at dawn to see the protected hollow. They would say, sometimes, that they saw 2 figures standing at the edge of the valley,
A man and a woman, holding hands. Not ghosts, just people, watching the sun rise over the land they had fought for. It was, of course, Samuel and Elena. It was their morning ritual, a quiet moment, to remember, and to be thankful. The story was not over. It was a beginning. The future was unspooling, bright and clear. In the ranch house, Elena was at her new desk. She was not doing the accounts. She was writing a letter to a wealthy woman she knew in the East, a woman who supported education. Elena was asking for money. She was asking for funds to build a second room on the schoolhouse. She wanted to hire Mr. Hemlock to teach mathematics and history. In the same room, Samuel was at his own desk. He was not looking at cattle prices. He was looking at a map, a new map of the entire valley. He was drawing careful lines, a new irrigation system, a large one that would bring the high spring water to all the ranches. He planned to propose it to Chayton and to the other ranchers. A shared system, a shared resource, a shared future. And far up in the hills, in the shade of a pine tree, Chayton was drawing his own map. He was preparing a new proposal for Judge Miller, not just for Red Hollow. He was proposing a larger Kiowa conservation area, a place where the buffalo could be respected, a place where the land and the spirits could be left in peace forever. The work was not finished. The work of building a home, the work of doing what is necessary, it is never finished. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let us know where you are listening from in the comments so we can all connect and share our thoughts. And we invite you to subscribe to our channel Wild West Tales. Like the video and press the hype button to support us so this story can be heard by more people.